Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the next session, session 2 of the final day of Dare to Be Great 4 era of the headset. And I'm excited to have. I looked down right just at the moment to see Andre say, "Good evening." I forget he's in the future. Where he's at over there. But I'm excited to have our session speaker today, Wendy Bundy, here. And she's going to be doing a session called Living with PTSD, a former 911 dispatcher perspective. My friend, take it away.
Thank you, and good morning. For me, it's about 9 o'clock a.m. I'm on the East Coast, but I've had my coffee, so we should be good. And I'm going to jump right in. I want to welcome you all for coming today. I really appreciate it. I did my first talk on this topic back in 2019 when I worked in a public library. And I've done several since then, but most have been in peer support and higher education settings. So this is only the second one that I've done for actually my people, other dispatchers, which is where my heart is. It's where it all kind of started for me. And I just want to point out, Ricardo put some poll questions out there for you. Just feel free to work on those whenever. I'm going to review them later in the slideshow, but you've got plenty of time. So I wanted to start off by just telling you a little bit more about me, my background, and my connection to this field, because I currently work in a role as an employee health and wellness coordinator for the Department of Corrections here in Virginia. But I was a 911 dispatcher for almost 7 years across 3 different agencies before that. And then I went back to school and got master's degrees in criminal justice and library science. I also have some graduate level coursework in rehab counseling, which is something I dabbled in for a little while. And I am a certified peer recovery specialist. That's a really big part of my life, and trained to facilitate that class here in Virginia. But where it really all started for me was, like I said, in the dispatch world. And I say it was my first real job right out of high school, but actually I started training on the weekends because my birthday's in March. So when I turned 18, I started training on the weekends while still in my senior year. And by the time I graduated in June, they were cutting me loose, and I was thrown into this world and had no idea what I was getting into, other than the fact that my uncle was a volunteer firefighter for years, and I had heard his pager going off when we would be at family events. And out the door he would go, to answer those calls. But otherwise, I really had no idea what I was stepping into. So with that being said, let's get started. Again, a little bit more about me and my current role. And then I wanted to also, I've heard a lot of people talking about, investing in yourself and professional development, and how important it is, not only in this career, but really any career that you're in. So this is a lot of the things that I'm trained in, or certifications that I hold. And yes, I know it's quite a lot. I'm definitely a lifelong learner, and I always look for ways to improve myself. And I think that's part of what's helped me on my journey to recovery and from some of the trauma that I've experienced over the last few years. Like I said, many of these tools are very helpful to me in that recovery process, especially the trauma-informed ones, seeking safety, the peer support trainings, the APPR, and all the NAMI programs that I'm trained to facilitate and present in. This is kind of my little resume of my work history. I put a picture on here from that first center that I worked in. I was the first dispatcher there to ever get an award. It was created for a resource manual that I put together on the night shift in my downtime. And like I said, as you can see, I went to work on in a variety of settings, and later even volunteered on the other side of the radio. My husband, who's also connected to this field, was a volunteer firefighter EMT for a while, and it was his great idea for us to run calls together on the other side of the radio. So he talked me into that, and I did that for a little while too. And he's still in the field. He's got over 15 years of service now. And he was a supervisor for several of those years after I left the profession. And now, ironically, he's at Shenandoah National Park in the same role that I held when I was there. So it's been really cool to have him on this journey with me as well. And you'll hear more about that as I go on. I do want to give you a trigger warning. Of course, being in this field, we all know what trauma is and bad calls. But I just wanted to point out that my presentation does have a lot of sensitive material and details related to those types of calls. I talk specifically about the death of a child, death of a coworker, death of those within my support system, self-harm, suicidal ideation, and eating disorders. I have a lot of resources that I provide at the end, but always remember to practice self-care throughout. Attend and listen at your own discretion. And if you need to leave or take a break at any point, feel free to do so. And so I had this bright idea this morning. I just changed this up this morning, that I wanted to share a relaxation technique just to kind of get us all grounded and in a good place, start our day off right, and be present in the moment. And one of those that I use in my personal practice is guided imagery. So if you're not familiar with guided imagery, that's okay. I'm going to walk you through it, and it just takes a couple of minutes. And it just, like I said, helps you really focus and kind of get in the moment. I put a picture on here of New Orleans because when I do this practice for myself, that is my place that I always like to imagine. You might imagine a beach or mountains or a lake. Some of these pictures might give you some inspiration for that, but anything that you feel would be beneficial, please use that as your practice. And so I'm going to just kind of walk you through it, give you the instructions. So if you're not familiar or never done this before, it's okay. Just take a moment and try to notice how you're feeling right now. You're just going to get relaxed kind of in your seat. You can close your eyes if you want to, or you can leave them open. You're going to pay attention to your muscles and see if they're tense or if they're relaxed, and if you have any thoughts or feelings going on right now. We're going to take a long, slow breath and then release it, and then continue taking some slow breaths. And this is the part where you're going to think about that favorite spot that you like to visit. Like for me, it's definitely New Orleans. I love that city and everything about it. Now you're going to see yourself at a distance in that place. So you're on the outside kind of looking in. I want you to notice the details of that setting. And not just focusing on what you can see, but also what sounds do you hear? Do you feel anything? Like, is the air moving around you? Do you smell anything in particular? Now I want you to walk into that setting more and notice more of the details. Really immerse yourself in that setting. Are the sounds getting any louder? Or maybe they're getting softer? Does anything smell differently? Reach out and touch something. Is it smooth or rough? We're going to spend a little time here enjoying this place that you like to visit. We're going to spend about 10 more seconds here, so just take it all in. Now I want you to notice how you feel. We're going to take another slow, deep breath. And then if you had your eyes closed, we're going to open them up and come back to the present in this session together. And just really think about how you feel after taking that moment for yourself, to just focus on you and a place that you enjoy being. Remember that this is a technique you can use whenever you want. You can make it longer, shorter, whatever works best for you in the time that you have. And if you want to share in the chat with each other just how that made you feel, and I'll go back and read some of the feedback later, but I really just like doing that to get centered. And sometimes I do it for only like maybe a minute or two before I have to do something. But I thought that was a really good exercise and practice that I would share with you all this morning. So I hope you really enjoyed that. And that got me a little bit more centered too. So it was also good for me to have that moment before I jump into what really happened. And I used to show a video that showed like what happened and sort of my worst calls. But over time, I've realized that while the video is good, we're all in this profession, and I really don't think you need to see it to really understand it. So I can just give you a brief recap. In my 4 years that I was at the county level, that first real job that I was in, I had an officer that got shot at, another one who was in a head-on car crash. Both of those luckily survived. But in the car crash, the person in the other vehicle was a fatality. And then shortly after that, I had a young child. She was about 3, that passed away in a house fire. And luckily, I had a really good partner a dispatch partner at the time. We were a 2-person center. And my partner is now my husband. So that bond and all of these calls that we had together is something that's really played a huge role in our marriage. But like I said, he was my dispatch partner at the time and worked all of those calls with me. And then when I moved on to the park in a very similar role, and all of this happened within just a couple of years of each other. So it was a lot of these calls sort of bam, bam, bam right on top of each other. So I'm at the park not long after that, and I find my coworker in cardiac arrest when I went in one night at midnight. And we were a 1-person center, so we only worked 1 person at a time. So he was by himself, and I was by myself going in, and I find him in cardiac arrest and had to call our local center for help. And my husband, who's still at the local center, was the person who answered my 911 call for help that night. So a lot of things. And then, of course, I had personal issues. I was learning how to be an adult, transitioning into that. I had dealt with a lot of family medical stuff as a teenager. So just a lot of things that happened in that short period of time. But I don't want to dwell on that too much because while that is a part of my story and sort of what motivated me to end up being where I'm at today, I want to talk more about the good times and all the cool stuff that I've done since then. And like I said, it wasn't all bad. I met my husband in that first role, and we've been together 14 years now. Next March will be our 15-year wedding anniversary, but we've been together a total of about 17 years. We adopted Pager, who you see on this slide, and Pager is actually still here with me. He's in behind me on the floor this morning. He was a dog that lived in the dispatch center for about a year. He was our therapy dog that they thought would be a good idea. But my husband and I started bringing him home with us on our days off, and eventually he just made the transition to our home with our other zoo, you might call it, because altogether now I have 4 dogs and 4 birds, and over the years we've had various other animals in the house. We are not a family with children, but we certainly have enough animals that are like our children. So that was a really good thing that came out of it. I also met Patty, who is a coworker that I like to really highlight. She was a retired school librarian that came to work at the center as an administrative assistant, and me and her just really bonded instantly. And as I decided to make the decision to leave, and I was navigating being a first-generation college student and all these things, she was just always that cheerleader that was in my corner, and she had a great bond with Pager. So she stayed in touch with us and went out to eat with us and came to our house and was a part of family celebrations and everything. So just a huge part of my support system there. Other coworkers that I was really close with, including my husband and other dispatch partners that I had before and after him. The food, the celebrations that we had, because it really was a family in all of the centers that I worked in. Um, Watching Jeopardy together on the night shift, NCIS, those kinds of shows. We had a lot of fun. We really did. So I do miss those pieces of it. And then there's my diagnosis. So I always point out that the first traumatic incident that I dealt with, which was the officer being shot at, was in 2007. And then others were very shortly after that. Um, but I don't want it to be ignored that you see on this slide, it was 2018 before I went and actually got help and got a mental health diagnosis. Um, like I talked about earlier, there was a lot of other factors that played into this and really made me more, I guess you could say, vulnerable, and not prepared to handle what I was coming into. Um, so it definitely wasn't just the job that caused this, but it is a key piece of it. So I can't ignore that either. Um, but again, I waited until 2018 to get that diagnosis. And part of why I waited so long is there's a lot of stigma in our community and family. There was a lot of stigma in the centers that I worked in. It was just something that we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about how to help ourselves. There a lot of lack of resources in my area. And I was trying to be superwoman. I thought I could do all of this on my own. I got diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome in 2011 and 2012 when things were starting to go downhill. I was having a lot of stuff that was showing up in my stomach, and they did all these tests, and that's pretty much all that they could find. Well, they couldn't find anything. So, of course, they just kind of went to irritable bowel syndrome. And looking back now, I feel like that was a misdiagnosis, and just the way that my symptoms were showing up. And so I've been able to piece that together, over time and by looking at patterns and things. And I used to go to the ER for all this stomach upsets and things, but I'm very proud to say the last time I've been in the ER for that was in May of 2016. So I consider that kind of my recovery date, and just kind of the date that I use to track the progress I've made since then. So what really helps me, as I'm, struggling with trying to make changes and trying to be better, and getting to the place where I'm at now, where I'm a lot better than what I was in those really rough years. These are the three biggest things. My husband, like I said, he's been there with me throughout this journey. We don't know a relationship without this type of career, and without these types of challenges, because we've been through it all together. And that's a huge, huge thing for me. And I think it's also a huge part of why our marriage is so strong and why it's lasted this long. And then there's my pets. Like I said, I have 4 right now. At one point in time, we had up to 6 dogs. And then we also have 4 birds. And then we have our family pet, it belongs to an aunt and uncle, and they're older, and it's a Jack Russell. So lots of energy. And I go and walk him a couple of times a week just to get that energy out for them. And then higher education. Um, that's been a huge lifesaver for me, just being able to learn more about myself and to do it in a safe space. I did all of my education online, except for a few creative writing classes at the community college. And by doing education online in those days when I was really struggling, my classmates didn't know. They had no idea what I was going through. I only shared with them, little pieces of my life. And through a screen, they had no idea. So I was able to hide the really rough days, and really get a lot accomplished even during those worst years. I talked about being a first generation college student and not knowing, what I was doing. So I ended up kind of kept going back and getting all of these other degrees. So in those worst years when I was struggling, I ended up with 2 associates, 2 bachelor's, and 2 master's degrees. So at least something good came out of it. I say some people, go to rehab, or they do some type of thing like that. I went to higher education. Of course, now I have the student loans to pay for, but I think it was worth it, because one way or another, I was going to be investing in myself and investing money somewhere. So at least I got that out of it. And of course, I couldn't tell you that I have all these other dogs without showing you some of them, because they're just so adorable and they're the light of my life. The 2 in the center are my 2 newest. That's Ivy and Maddie. We just got those 2 this year. And then I've also got Pager, who you saw on the other slide, and he's in a couple of these. And then the other one that looks more like a beagle, he is Luke, and he's my oldest right now. He is 15 actually this month. So I've got two that are older, and then I've got the two that are the young ones. To say it's never a quiet household is an understatement. So what else helps? Well, I talked about the higher education, all those degrees that I got. Well, one of them, a master's in criminal justice, I had the flexibility to really do the thesis on a project that I wanted and that was close to my heart. So I chose emergency medical dispatchers. They wanted me to really pick like a niche of it. And so I titled it emergency medical dispatchers, but really the group that I surveyed was at the old center where I worked at, and they did police, fire, and EMS. It was a very small sample. They were a staff of 14, and only 7 of them responded to my survey. But I think the biggest thing that I got out of that is I found even those with the strongest support systems and belief that they could handle the stress of the job still experienced negative stress related effects in some way, shape, or form. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to get PTSD or a mental health diagnosis, but it does mean that you're going to have some negative reactions. And of course, that's why you need to have outlets or coping skills or something in place, good support systems, even to handle all of the stuff that's being thrown at you. Because no matter what, like, we're still human at the end of the day. And if this stuff doesn't affect you in some way, then something's majorly wrong, because that's just our normal human reaction. I heard someone say one time that, it's opposite the way that you think about it. It's we're humans experiencing this and not the other way around. So it's normal reactions, and we want to have that. But I think doing this research was really eye-opening for me, and it was before I got my mental health diagnosis. So it really made me realize that I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one feeling this. It was just something that we had never talked about. And then counseling is a huge part of my journey too. And I'm not trying to push counseling on anybody in any way, shape, or form. I know that everybody's journey and what they need, and the types of coping skills or the types of support that they need are very individualized, and I highly support that. But for me, counseling has been a game changer. I started with one counselor who had actually worked, she was a psychiatrist that had actually worked with NYPD's police force. And then she came back to where I live, which is her hometown, and opened a private practice here. And when I heard her story and who she had worked with, I was like, well, if anybody will get what I've been through and can help me, it's her, because of the situations that she's been in and the people she's worked with before. And she was absolutely amazing. But then I switched counselors because she was pretty expensive with her certifications, which I understand. So I switched to a counselor who was just coming out of school and was working on getting her LPC, and was able to actually see me on a sliding rate, which was great for me. It was free in the beginning, and then as she started her hours, it was very cost effective. And not having consistent insurance, where I was working only part-time here and there and switching jobs a lot, that was really helpful for me and my family. And so she was really like a counselor and a peer support person all built into one, because we had a lot of things that we were peers on. She was just coming out of school for the counseling. I was just coming out of school for my library science degree. And we were about the same age, and we had been through a lot of the same types of challenges together. So I really consider her to be a huge part of my recovery and getting me so far in a short period of time. I worked with her from 2019 and just actually transitioned out of counseling with her last year, with the caveat that, her door is always open. And if I need something, I can always go back, whether it be just for like a one-off session here and there, or to go back and actually, be in like weekly or monthly follow-ups with her. The door is always open, and that's always an option if I ever feel like it's coming to that. And one of my biggest regrets is not starting that process sooner, because it was so beneficial to me. The picture on here is a good reminder as well of like all the stuff that I had been through. She had me write it on these Post-it notes, and it was like anything that I thought was sort of a monumental moment. And then at the end, we went back and put flowers on the good stuff and the stones on the negative stuff. And as you can see, there's more flowers in this picture than there are stones. But when I thought about it before having this visual representation, I was always thinking about the negative, just seeing the stones. And so I needed to see it in this way to see that there was more good than bad. So I keep this picture and I look at it quite a bit to just always remind me of that. Anniversary dates are another big one for me. Um, I said I did a lot of kind of self awareness and figuring out patterns and different things. So I realized with those ER visits I was having, after quite some time, they were correlating with the dates or close to a lot of the dates where I had these bad calls. And once I figured that pattern out, I was like, okay, how do I fix that? Well, I need to figure out a way that I can be aware that they're coming up. I can prepare for them. I can do something so that they don't affect me in that way. Like I don't let it get to that stage where it kind of catches me off guard. So I have those anniversary dates of the worst calls that I had. And also a couple other things like the day I lost my father-in-law, the day I lost one of my pets that I was really close with and I'd had for a long time. All of those really traumatic things. I put them in my phone calendar on yearly reminders so that I can see, because I'm a calendar person and I'm always planning, I'm always looking at my calendar of what's coming up. So I see them well in advance now. And so I can start looking ahead and I can even, for some of the worst days, I don't plan like any trips. Um, I I have taken off work before. Um, I make sure that family knows. I tell my husband, like, you remember this date's coming up. So, like, don't plan anything. Know that it's going to be like a pretty low key day for us. I just having that awareness and being able to have those conversations about them and around them is a big part of why I'm no longer having the reactions in my stomach and some of the things that cause me to end up in the ER. So, that's a really good tip. My support system is also huge for me. They always joke that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I think it takes a village for all of us, even as adults. Like, this is my village. Um, and I'm sure that I've missed some people or professionals here, but it's a lot of people that keep me going. Of course, I don't see all of these people on like a regular basis. I see the PCP once a year, and additionally, if something comes up, but um, these are all the people over the years that I need in some way, shape, or form, and in some frequency to keep me going. And I really want to point out on this one the peer support groups and trainings, because I've been through a lot of those. And like each time I go through a new training, it's almost like I create another little family, like another little mini support system, and we'll stay in touch and we'll support each other and lift each other up. Same way with a lot of the NAMI stuff that I'm involved in. It's like little families. So I have all of these different groups of people that are cheering me on, and at the same time, I'm cheering them on as well. Um, it's just really cool to have those types of relationships. And as far as the professional side, I know for some people it can seem kind of scary to see that many. And then from a cost perspective too, because some of these specialists and things, if you don't have insurance, you're looking at upwards of like $300 an appointment. And when I was really in those darker days and years, I was hopping from job to job. I didn't stay at a job longer than like 2 to 3 months. So I didn't have stable insurance either. And so what I did for a lot of them is I saw people on sliding scales, like I talked about with the counselor, or if I knew I had a specialist that I absolutely had to see, I would save up for months just to be able to have the money for that appointment. So I just want to point out that there's tips and tricks and ways around um, making sure that you have the finances for it, because the finances is a big piece of it as well. And then I planned, like I said, I'm a planner. I planned stuff when I was starting to get better after I had the diagnosis and realizing how much I really just needed to stop isolating and be out there and around people and connecting with people again. I started planning some trips, and I did these very cost effectively too. The ALA conference, which is related to the library field, I got a scholarship for that one. So all I had to do was literally get myself there. Um, and while I was there, I met John McCarthy. If you haven't heard of him, he was a paramedic in New Orleans for quite some time, and he wrote this book, Hard Roll. It's really cool. I highly recommend checking it out. But he actually attended that conference, and I got to meet him and take a picture with him and get his autograph. So that was really cool. ACRL, again, I did a scholarship for that one, and I have family in that area, so we spent some time with family that we don't usually get to see. My husband went along on that trip. And then APCO Baltimore, I tagged along with my husband because he was going for work, and I wanted to go and experience some things. And that's actually where I first really got involved and learned about what Ricardo does, because I went to his session on Within the Trenches and did the podcast at that one. So that was pretty cool. And then I like to say that I do a lot of advocacy. It's a huge part of my everyday life. For someone as introverted as me, because I don't know if you can tell during this presentation, but it's really not like me to put myself out there and to do a lot of public speaking stuff. Although this past year I've done 3, and I already have a couple that I'm hoping to get for next year. So I'm changing that up a little bit, but really I'm an introvert at heart. So I found a lot of ways that I could advocate or volunteer or do things for mental health awareness, and particularly in this field, but I could do it in a way that I was comfortable and it was safer for me. And that's through like sharing stories for blog posts. If you use the QR code, you'll see one of those that I did for NAMI Virginia a couple years ago. The picture that I use on a lot of my profiles has a necklace that has PTSD awareness on it. I participated in a lot of trainings for advocacy through Vocal and NAMI Smarts. I do advocacy day events. A lot of those have been virtual the last couple of years. Send letters and emails to politicians. I'm trying to get better about that one, but sometimes I feel like I really don't know what I'm doing with that yet. It's still a learning process for me. And then speaking at conferences and events like this. So I have a lot of coping skills and a lot of things that really help me get in a good place, like the exercise that we did earlier today. Um, a lot of these too I've already talked about a little bit. Healthy eating is a big one because I had the irritable bowel syndrome misdiagnosis, whatever you want to call it, and because I had a lot of issues that were coming through my stomach. That's been a huge one for me. So I do a lot of meal prepping and healthy eating these days, just to really make sure that I'm not tipping the scales in the wrong direction there. Again, I talked about many of the positive ones that I'm doing already. I included negative on this one too, because I wanted to point out that sometimes we can use something as a coping skill and think that it's good, but it can go negative if we're not careful and aware of how we're using it. So for me, I'm always cold. And I think some of that is related to medical stuff because I do have thyroid issues as well. But then that night that I found my coworker was also out in the snow. So I think there's got to be some correlation with that and maybe my body temperature regulation. So I use a lot of heat stuff. I use heat wraps, heat blankets, that sort of thing. And for a while, I used space heaters a lot too. But if I'm not careful, I use them to the extent where I burn myself. I've actually burned my stomach before with a heat wrap. So I have to be really self-aware these days not to do that kind of thing. It's okay if I use it, but keep it on a lower setting. Too restrictive eating, again, with the healthy eating, I have went too extreme with it. And not last year, but the year before, I actually was at a point where I was losing too much weight and I was down to almost 100 pounds. So again, I had to start seeing a dietitian. I had to start really being aware of, okay, it's one thing to eat healthy, but we can't go to these extremes. Same way with being too structured or too isolated, those sort of things. I have to really make a conscious effort every day to force myself to not tip the scales in those negative directions again. And with that is a lot of daily tips that I have that I share with others. I have a lot of morning and nighttime routines that I do, the meal prepping, taking breaks throughout the day when I'm on screens a lot. Coffee and tea is great for me. I had to have my coffee this morning before coming on here. Morning chats with coworkers and sharing struggles with coworkers within reason. Those are big for me because for years after I was struggling, I shut everyone out except for my husband. But everyone else that I worked with, and when I was at those jobs and jumping around, like when people would start getting close, that's when I would start getting scared and I would back off or I would leave the jobs. So it was a really big thing for me to get back into the habit of being in a good work environment and in a place where I could have those conversations in a safe way and in a good, productive way. I'm not saying like just like blah, spill everything out to them, but just asking how people are doing and getting more than just the I'm fine or it's a good day, that kind of thing. Just going just a little bit deeper. and knowing who it's safe to have that with. Other tips, Love Like Crazy. That's a song by Lee Bryce that I feel like is my husband and I's song, because we really have beat the odds. And like I said, everything that we've been through has made us stronger. Being grateful, I used to write gratitude list every morning, and it would just be like 3 little things. Um, and that really helps me stay grounded. So, like, I'm thankful that I woke up today, that my dogs are healthy, and that I have a roof over my head. Like, the little things really do mean a lot. Allowing myself a lot of grace, that one's big, because I'm a perfectionist at heart too, and I always want things to be perfect. So I really have to lower that bar a lot, and just allow myself to be, and whatever happens, happens. And if it's a mistake, we correct it, we learn from it, we move on, that kind of thing. And asking for help, I never wanted to ask for help. I waited so many years, like almost 10 years, to get the help that I needed. And I can't do that anymore. Like, I've realized I cannot do this alone. I have to ask for help. It's a huge thing for me. And so that brings us to the future. And I wish that I knew what the future holds, but I'm honestly not sure anymore, because the last couple of years have really surprised me. COVID has been hard for everyone. And while it's been hard for me from, the anxiety side, and being around people and afraid of, getting sick, and things getting worse and going back downhill, in other ways, it's been really good for me. I've had a lot of good, positive growth, that kind of like post-traumatic growth that they talk about has happened for me during this time. So, even if you would have asked me like last year if I would have been doing presentations and conferences and things this year, I'd been like, no, that's not me. That's not my thing. But apparently it is my thing, because like I said, this is the third one I've done this year. And so I've just ironically learned never to say never, never to cross anything off the table. And I've learned to say yes to a lot of things. I had people from very early on tell me, you need to share your story. You need to put yourself out there. It's really powerful what you've been through, and all of the things that you've experienced. And I was really scared to do it because of the stigma. And I've learned that I cannot do that anymore, that there's a reason why I've been put in these spaces, and that there are people that need to hear this message. There are people that need to be lifted up, and to know that they're not alone. And so that's just the really big thing that I hope you get out of everything that I've said today, is that we're all in this together. And that if you or someone has experienced some of this stuff, you're not alone. And it's okay to talk about it in the right way, and in those safe spaces, and to help and support each other, because that's really the root of it all. Connection is so important for all of us as human beings. And so now I'm going to try, this is my first time doing poll questions like this during a presentation, but I'm going to try to pull up these poll questions and see how you guys responded. And a lot of these were things I was just kind of curious about, just to see kind of who was in the audience. So like, how long have you been a dispatcher in this field? I see a lot of you have been in the field for quite some time. A lot were the 15 years plus. Do you have PTSD or another mental health diagnosis? I see that's 20 no, 13 yes at this point, and more are coming in as we're talking. Have you disclosed your mental health diagnosis at work? The majority is a strong no on that one, and I completely understand. I have only disclosed my mental health diagnosis officially with HR in one place that I've been in, and it actually was not a good experience. So I completely understand leaning towards no on that. But we're going to talk about some resources for that in a couple of slides too. Do you feel like mental health stigma still exists in your center? Wow. Okay. So this is sort of what I wanted to see too, is how much more work we need to do to break down this wall. So 27 votes for yes, and that greatly outweighs the no's on that. So we still have a lot of work to do, and I'm hoping by me sharing my story and getting out there and just showing that, it doesn't have to end careers. I'll talk about, how mine went, but it doesn't have to be that story for everyone. So um, glad to see that feedback and how much more work we need to do on that. Do you feel like you have good coping skills for dealing with stress on the job? Awesome. Lots of you say yes. And even if you have good coping skills in place, maybe some of the things that I shared today are new, and maybe you'll try out some of those or switch them up. Because if you're like me, sometimes something will work for a while, and then things might get worse for a couple of days, and you feel like you just need to do something a little different and kind of switch it up. So like yoga is really good for me, and I did yoga religiously for about a year, and then I kind of fell out of practice because things were going better. Well, I realized here lately, because I'm in a transition period again, I need to go back to yoga. So actually this week I started trying to do it again, but it's really hard to switch it up and to get back into those practices. But it's definitely something that to keep in mind, that you can always switch it up or use different things for different days, different situations, that sort of thing. And do you feel like you have the support and resources for dealing with stress on and off the job? Again, I'm glad to see a lot of you are saying yes, so that's awesome. And I'm going to share some more with you in the next couple of slides. Maybe there's some that you've heard of, and that's awesome. Maybe there will be some new ones that you're not as familiar with. So thank you all for participating in that. I always think that it's really helpful to make things a little more interactive and not just like talk at you for the entire presentation. So I really appreciate you participating. And so here's some of the resources that I wanted to share. And I broke it up as, to help you stay in 911 or if you decide to leave. But the reality is a lot of these are helpful either way. And I said I would talk about, my experience with leaving the field. So leaving this field was absolutely one of the hardest decisions I ever made. And it was so highly personal for me. My husband stayed, and that was really hard still being connected to it through him. So while I personally left, I never really like completely got away from it. But I knew that I couldn't be the best version of me and continue to help others in the way that they deserved if I stayed in that chair and didn't help myself first. So that was really my motivation for it. And when I first made that decision to walk away, I didn't know if I was walking away forever or if I would end up back in it. I was still in limbo. And I mean, even today, I say I'm not going back to it, but like I've shared, crazier things have happened in my life. So I'll never say never, but I don't think that I'm going back to it. I'll put it that way. But I want you to know that, regardless if you're deciding to leave or if you're deciding to stay, or if you just feel like I need some ideas of what I can do better either way, these are some of the things that I've found to be the most helpful over the years. CISM type trainings, peer support programs, and NAMI support groups. I trained for a peer support program after leaving the field, but I also did the CISM training while still in it. And so I see how both of those could be valuable to people staying in it. NAMI support groups are really cool. A lot of those meet online now, and they're pretty anonymous in that, like, you can only put your first name and you don't have to really share a whole lot of like who you are and where you're from. You just have to share what you're comfortable with. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more anonymous, that's a good option to kind of have an outlet. I mentioned EAPs, employee assistance programs, because I didn't know a lot about those when I was working in this field. And what little bit I did know, I was still afraid to use them. But in my current role, we're really hyping up awareness around the EAPs, because when you use them, you're only a number. They only track how many people call that number or reach out for help. They don't track who and like where you work and that sort of thing. They just tally a number. So it's not going to like get back to a supervisor or anything like that. And I think that that's really good. Again, when you're looking for a little bit more discretion and not having everyone kind of in your business. DARS is the Department of Aging and Rehab Services. I think in different states it's called something a little bit different, but that's what it's called in Virginia. And I worked for them for about a year, and I was on the track to be a rehab counselor with them. So I started learning more about like disclosing different mental health and medical conditions to HR and accommodations and all of those sort of things. And it's different in this field because it's 24/7. So it's not like you can request an accommodation to work a day shift if that's not where the need is. And that sort, because it has to be, an accommodation has to be beneficial for both you and the employer. There's some give and take to it, but there are other like smaller accommodations that you may be able to request or have conversations about, that would make it easier for you to stay in the field and not have to make a decision to, completely leave. So I highly recommend that, if you have those situations, that you reach out to those types of departments, and talk with a rehab counselor and really see what your options are and educate yourself on that, so that you can try to figure out ways to navigate staying in the field, if it's something small that maybe could be adjusted for you. I'm also a fan of warm lines. I did during COVID. I was a part of the COVID warm line for Virginia. And so a lot of those are super anonymous. Again, you don't have to give names and addresses or anything like that, but it's just an outlet where you can call and talk to someone who is a peer who, is just going to listen to you and support you and validate you, and lift you up and give you some resources if you need them. So they are a really good option. And there's various ones all over the United States. We have quite a few here in Virginia. We have the RVA one, which is just a generalized warm line. And then we also have Here at First, which is specific for first responders. Safe Call Now is a bigger crisis type line, that many of you may have already heard of. I think they're based out of Washington. I follow them on a lot of social media, and they're doing a lot of great things. Again, counseling and professional development or learning in any way, shape, or form is always helpful. And a lot of those things can be helpful even if you decide to leave the field. Because like you can see, many of the things are duplicated under the other column as well. And then I'm going to share my information at the end of the presentation. I'm always happy to talk to anyone if you're in limbo thinking about, do I stay, do I go, that kind of thing. I'm always open to having those conversations because I know firsthand what that can be like. And again, regardless of what decision you make, connection is the power that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. The quote by Brene Brown. I love her stuff. She is amazing. And if you don't want to do any like actual college courses or anything, just watch some of her TED Talks. They're amazing and powerful and so good for professional development and will lift you up. Again, some more mental health resources. Here I have the number for Safe Call Now, and the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which also now 988 has taken its place. Some of the NAMI helpline numbers, and then the HERO one that I mentioned, that's the warm line, that's the number for that at the bottom. This is our warm line that's out of Richmond in Virginia, the MHA one on the side, but I don't think you have to be specifically from Virginia to call it, but there are various ones of these located all throughout the United States. So I'm sure you can find one closer to you if you're in another area. And then the Eating Disorders Helpline, that's a national one. And while I have not actually used that one because I've had a lot of issues surrounding a sort of undiagnosed eating disorder, I wanted to have a really good one on hand should I ever need it. So this is the one that was the most highly rated, and that if I would ever need assistance, I would reach out to myself. So I always share that one too. And remember, I did work in a library, right? I was a librarian for a short period of time, and I do have my library science degree. So I got to give you some book recommendations, and there's a lot of them out there. I mean, I could fill up slides and slides and slides full of it. But these are some of the best ones related to this field, especially the Answering 911. Finding Daddy is written by a dispatcher. Struggle Well talks a lot about post-traumatic growth. Increasing Resilience in Police and Emergency Personnel is by Dr. Stephanie Kahn. And if you don't know anything about her, she started out as a dispatcher and then I believe went into being a police officer and is now a police psychologist. So she's kind of been across the gamut, and has some really great advice in that book. The I Love a Cop, I Love a Firefighter series. I always joke, I wish that this lady would do I Love a Dispatcher. She hasn't yet, but I'm hopeful that one day she will. But they're both awesome books. Robin Roberts, her book is just really beautiful. That everybody's got something. It really puts into perspective that trauma piece and kind of being trauma informed and realizing that everyone's carrying something. So we just need to be better human beings. And Us Against the World, that book is super powerful for me because they're a couple that's navigated their careers together and still managed to kind of come out on top. And in all honesty, it probably has saved our marriage over the last couple of years a couple of times because it hasn't all been, great. We've been through some tough stuff together, and it's always good to read other people's stories of how they've navigated things together like that. And then I do have some references and links. I didn't really talk about this a lot during the presentation, but when I was sort of in that limbo state and trying to decide if I was going to come back to this field, I volunteered on one of APCO's standards and worked on it with a really awesome group of people. And this particular one, critical incident stress debriefing, has a portion of it that deals with peer support. So my expertise in that area was super helpful. But that is the link to that standard if you want to check it out. And then my thesis that I did has been published, and that is the link to the entire thesis if you want to read it. And then also the NAMI Talks blog that I shared the QR code for a little bit earlier. And with that, I am done. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them. I think I put 2 in the Q&A. And I was actually going to answer the one during my slides, but I got a little off track and didn't. So I can go back and answer that one and the other one that I put in. And then if anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
So let's start with that first one there. Um, Excellent work. All of the resources and everything. I think one of the best things about this is, of course, us all coming together and sharing these stories,
Mm-hmm.
and people feeling comfortable to be able to do the same thing. To see that there are others that are going through, similar things in life, and you get to hear it, you feel comfortable, and then you're able to share as well when you're ready. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the best parts, is to let everyone know that it's okay to share, but as long as you're able to share when you are ready. When you're ready to
Mm-hmm.
do so, then definitely do so. So, as you were kind of talking about in your presentation, and along with this question, did your spouse ever think about leaving this profession during your struggles?
Yeah, so when I did this presentation for a group of dispatchers back in October, this question came up. Um, and he certainly did. And there were also times where I kind of pushed him and gave him ultimatums. And that's where I talked about our marriage was not always great because there were, nights where we were having fights and I was going, it's either the job or me. That's how rough it was. And obviously, as you heard, he didn't make that choice and it didn't turn out that way. He did take 2 shorter breaks. One when his dad died, and that was for about a year. And that was we were really close to his dad, so that was a rough time for both of us as well. Um, and he ended up going back after trying a couple other things, and like nothing really worked out. Um, and I think I just had to come to terms with the fact that this is who he is. Like this is what he's made. This is the choice that he's made. Um, and that if I'm going to play my part, like I have to be accountable for my actions in it. And so I had to deal with my crap and do the counseling and do the work on me to be able to support him in his goals, like he very much has supported me throughout this entire process.
Mhm.
And continues to support me to this day. Like he worked last night a midnight to 8 shift and has come in and he's babysitting the dogs so they'll be quiet so I can get on here and do this presentation. But it's a lot of give and take, and I think we've just really learned how to be good partners together and keep as much of it separate as we can. We put a lot of boundaries in place, like I said, please don't have a radio in the house because that's triggering for me to hear some of the tones and types of calls.
Mhm.
So, we don't have a radio in our house anymore, and he's not in a supervisory role anymore, so he doesn't need to have it now. Um, we also don't talk about it during dinner. It doesn't have to engulf our whole lives like it did for those first couple of years that we were together. So we've just found creative ways to handle it, I'll say.
That is awesome. That is always good to have that, the support system, and to be willing to do all of those things, for you, especially like you were saying with the radio, not to have it
Mhm.
in there because it's triggering, and that's
Right.
good to have that understanding.
Mhm.
So then, excuse me, the next one here, is, what can administrators, managers, supervisors do to help staff who are struggling and hiding it? And before you, go into this here, I just want to read a comment that was added to this question here. Someone saying, um, Valerie here says, get to know your team so you can recognize when things are going on is key. Being able to talk to them with ease and know how to give the needed resources. Sometimes they just need to be heard. No advice, just heard. Completely agree there.
Yes, absolutely. And my answer to that sort of goes along with it. There's no like one way. There's no right or wrong way. It's so
Mhm.
individualized for everybody. And like my situation, I worked with my spouse, and so we were protecting each other. We hid it. He respected my decision not to share it and not to talk about it. So it was really easy for me to hide it from our supervisors and managers and everybody. Um, but like, what advice would I give for people? Like, you've got to figure out how to connect with your team, like she was saying. You have to get to know them on a level where they trust you, not just as a supervisor, but as a person. And some of that is that trauma informed thing, realizing that we're all bringing something to the table, whether it be from the field or not from the field. Um, and kind of letting them know like it's okay to talk about it. If you share a little bit of what you've been through, like I've heard so many people do during this conference this week, but if you share just a little bit of what you've been through and how you've dealt with it, or you post those resources on a bulletin board that's in the comm center, that helps to normalize the conversations. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it is over time going to build that trust and rapport, and hopefully make it a more normal conversation that you can have with each other.
Awesome. Let me look back over here into excellent. Yeah, I was so while you were going through all of this, I was watching. I had the polls open. I was just watching everything go through and go through, and I thought, wow, like
Hmm.
this is eye-opening. A lot of it, especially the have you disclosed your mental health diagnosis at work? That one right there. A couple people did. The majority have not, and like very very understanding on that as well.
Hmm.
I get it. I get it. Um, this has been excellent. So, people who are watching right now, whether it be right now live or in the replay, please make sure to reach out to Wendy and other resources that you have, because as we continue to say, it's okay not to be okay, and there's help out there. There are resources. It's not like the way it was when I started in 2001 and so on. I mean, from about 2016 on, things have continued to change,
Hmm.
and people are opening up, people are talking, people are sharing their stories, people are sharing their resources. It has been an excellent time, which is definitely why it is the era of the headset. So thank you so very much, Wendy, for this amazing presentation, for sharing your story, and also for sharing these resources, because a lot of times too, you want to do something, you just don't know where to start. And
Yes.
sometimes you don't know who to ask either. So
Mhm.
sessions like yours, and others that have been out there, that's why they're so important, because someone will hear your story, they'll see these resources, and there we go. There's a spot for me to start. And sometimes it might be right there, right? It's like on the tip of your tongue or right there on the edge.
Mhm.
And it's there. You don't know where to go. But here it is right here. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I haven't even looked at the chat yet, but I see it's been blowing up, and people were so interactive. And I'm just so thankful for everyone who listened. And whatever you got out of it today, whatever you take away, I hope it's what you needed, and what you feel like is going to be beneficial to you. And I'm so grateful for everyone who still sits in that chair, because it's such an important job. And I respect you so much.
Awesome. Thank you again. And everyone who is here, we're going to be going to the next session. I will bring you all over there, and we will see you here in just one moment.